Welcome to episode 4. Hi, everybody. Hi, Akshay. I am in such a bad mood today and I'm feeling very upset. So, what happened, what you witnessed just now was a happy face, uh, corresponding happy emotive responses like laughter, but me very clearly calling out that I was in a bad mood. Yeah, that's what you witnessed. And actually, I think we see this often enough. Misplaced emotions, uh, and not being able to say I'm angry the way socially we have been taught to express anger, or socially we've been taught to express happiness. Also, it's also drilled into us that we are always supposed to be happy. The happy state of mind, finding peace is supposed to be a good thing. Finding happiness is the good thing, and being angry or being sad is not such a good thing. Welcome to the Sense Kaleidoscope Autism Podcast. Today we're here to talk about language and the lack of, and how it manifests through emotions.
And if we have to further break that down, I think the questions that would come to anybody is one, why is this child laughing while he's saying,
Right.
I am sad? And two, if he is laughing, is he really sad? Correct?
Yeah.
And in the work that we both have done, we have seen these misplaced emotions primarily from my experience because of what I keep calling cognitive regression. And I'm going to try and explain that so it's not misinterpreted in any manner. We saw this, just to bring back context, we saw this in students between the ages of 11 and 14.
Yeah.
Mostly. Uh, in some cases, we also saw that they could not label the emotions at all. If something bad happened, for example, if there was a loud sound that can really shake you up, or if the teacher was
The tone
being,
was not.
yes, being angry and showing it in the tone, then you would see the child start laughing in the classroom and continuously and uncontrollably. Okay. In autism, looking at things like this is fairly common.
Right.
You articulated something over there, so you gave a hint to the audience. When there is zero articulation, we will have to go back and think about language. Language is the most powerful tool to articulate our emotions.
Is what we assume in the neurotypical world.
Correct. In the autism space, we know about communication impairment. We both have been talking a great deal about it. And communication impairment doesn't necessarily mean the child is nonverbal. Impairment doesn't necessarily mean that there is a mute child over here. There can be a child who's speaking but is making absolutely no sense to you.
Most often, that is the case. Most often, a child with limited verbal capability might be able to communicate way better than a child with verbal ability. Verbal ability is
Example.
different from
Let's give examples.
communication.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you brought this. I spoke about non-verbalness and I spoke about verbalness, where there is no meaning to language. You have brought in, there is articulation, but it still is not mapping. Can you expand with an example?
So, for instance, a person who possibly is nonverbal on the spectrum might be able to either write angry or show a sad face or put your head down or show a point to a picture or whatever. And that is very clear communication that I am upset or I am angry. And they possibly even write it out, right? The person who is verbal and who has a communication impairment, consequently, possibly from a comprehension impairment itself, which is basically putting the whole thing under cognitive regression, where we're saying that a child has not understood, how to display that anger or sadness, and is trying to manage through social expectations of being happy, the whole toxic happiness conversation. that is the difference between the two. So the child without verbal ability was able to tell you that he was sad or she was sad. Child with verbal ability, I gave a hint, but maybe just imagine that whole scenario without saying I am sad, but just generally like having a really bad day, throwing things down in the art lab, doing all kinds of things that are so out of sync with being happy and calm.
So if I can bring in the perspective and take it back to what we were talking, verbal, so language is present, but language has no meaning. And verbal, language is present, language has some amount of meaning.
Right.
Out of 100%, maybe we can say 30, 40, 50. Okay, no
Okay.
clear sentence structuring, maybe no ability to have the articulation for complex emotions, even mid-range environmental situations over there. If we go back into the concept of cognitive regression and language having no meaning, let's start from there. I want to bring another example where I was in the classroom and a student had been working with me for 90 minutes on worksheets, and he does struggle with educational work. Obviously,
Academic, you mean.
yes, academic work specifically. And it's a core subject that we were doing. And he probably wanted a break. Was not able to say, I want a break. Instead, starts to tell me to do my work properly. And starts to yell at me, saying, why can't you do this responsibly?
Okay.
All right. Language is there, but if you see contextually, does it make sense? Because who over there is actually not doing their work? It's the student. Does this make sense to you?
Yes.
And over a period of time, when I started to look at more examples like that, I realized, and bringing back to the conversation of imitation, which is very interesting, what children see around them and how they observe adults speaking around them or using that language, but using that contextually means that you have to develop comprehension to do that. But a child with autism who's struggling in educational environments, who is regressed, does not have meaning for words,
Right.
does not have meaning to sentences. What he or she will do is, if Vahini is going to speak in this way when she is happy, then I will map that when I'm feeling happy. If Vahini speaks in X way when she is upset, I will simply map Vahini when I'm upset.
So, adding to what you said, I think we're also talking about language with absolutely no meaning.
Correct.
Like it can be A, it can be gibberish, and B, it can be just words that they have heard. Okay? Which brings back the concept of echolalia, where I'm just re-saying the words that I have heard because I like the ring of the tone to it. I like the way it sounds.
Also, the rote
So the rote,
capacity is very good in these cases.
yes, yes. So because the rote capacity is good, I like the sound of saying Akshay, 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 Akshay. For instance, so at any time that I'm feeling happy, I might just say Akshay, 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 Akshay. And I don't really like the sound of saying Vahini maybe. So when I'm angry, I say Vahini, Vahini, Vahini. Now the point I'm trying to make is that for a layperson it may not have no meaning, right? But for them, very clearly, I am saying Akshay, Akshay, one, to communicate that I'm happy, and two, I feed off that Akshay, Akshay to the extent that after a certain point I can't stop.
Isn't that a stim mechanism?
It is a stim mechanism rooted in emotion, um, paired with echolalia and moving towards stimming for a trigger. To continue this,
Explain the stimming for a trigger a little bit more.
so suppose I say Vahini and I am up when I am upset, right? And I stopped. Now, when I shouted Vahini, Vahini, Vahini 3 times, then it is constantly reminding me of that particular situation, which is a distress situation, which gets me angry or upset or riles me up, right? So, more I say it, it keeps reminding me of that. I will rile myself up till I feel absolutely distressed by just that one word. So, there are warning words that we use as, as special educators and as therapists. Oh, he said that word, that means he's in a bad mood,
Correct.
right? Now, to just say that, label it and leave it there is one thing. But for us to ensure that we say no, okay, turn around and say Akshay is upset. Okay, when he's going on saying Vahini, Vahini. No, stop. Akshay is upset. So you are actually turning around and giving his emotion language, giving his emotion meaning to be able to speak in a certain way to get the desired response. Okay, what do you want to do? Do you want to time out? Do you want to go outside? Do you want to do this? At least bring the child to say, I am upset. Then you move on to, I am upset because. Then you give him options to choose. Then you get him to understand that
Lot
he
of
can either leave
practice.
the environment, continue in the environment, or choose whatever he wants to at that point in time.
Something that is appropriate. Also, the fact that the practice has to fall into place. Again, we'll go back into the multi-pronged approach and the time and the effort and so on and so forth. So, can we do a? It was very interesting to hear when you were saying the the word, the stim mechanism. We see something similar in neurotypicals as well.
I do it, that's a different story. Then I also have, like, when we're talking about misplaced words and emotions, I do it purposely. I mean, I have, I'm quite sarcastic most of the time. And I can be extremely passive aggressive. So yeah, I mean, as neurotypicals, we indulge in this behavior, but I don't know, for some reason, it's socially appropriate to,
I it's one of the things that I really liked about you, because I could see that if you were upset, then the passive aggression or the sarcasm, mostly the sarcasm.
no, the sarcasm more, the passive aggression, I don't think very many people see.
Yeah, the sarcasm I thought was a very interesting way of dealing with your frustration, and also settling it.
Yeah, no, but I think that, for me, adding humor to a little bit of humor to life is what is kind of
Correct.
a relief to break the madness or the monotony or even the frustration for that matter.
Coming to the autistic world, that's very hard to do because we're talking about words with no meaning. Now, if we have to build the comprehension and the cognition and take the child to words with meaning, we also know that they are extremely literal.
See, so interestingly, right? Like, we've always spoken about the theory of mind and the student not having the ability to be in your shoes, right? Though I find it that when I'm at my lowest, right, that student automatically knows that I am at my lowest and will take complete advantage. So I refuse to believe that there is absolutely no theory of mind on a light and
I agree.
but when you're saying that we usually tell educators, caregivers, any kind of support mechanism not to try and be as literal as possible, because the child does not have the ability to understand sarcasm or passive aggressiveness. They don't even understand jokes most times.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
We teach them to kind of find humor in their life. We teach them, in fact, initially when you teach them how to joke or how to laugh, it is so engineered, it seems like, it totally looks out of place.
Yes. Yes.
Right? But when you're saying, like, try and speak, like, I remember there was a person who had died, and every student, okay, came up with a different story. One said he passed away. I said, what is the meaning of he passed away? And he wasn't able to articulate. Another said, I'm going to the temple to visit him. And I said, why are you going to the temple? He said, no, because my parents told me that this person has gone to God.
Yes.
Right? And God lives in the temple.
Correct.
So this is the level of literal understanding and comprehension. So when you speak to a child on the spectrum or a person on the spectrum, it is important to gauge their level of comprehension and language when you use it. So much so that even if it is a loved one, I have always questioned everybody in my circle saying, why can't you just say he died? It is not a cuss word. What is the problem in using? No, you have to dress it up with, passed away.
You have to cushion things.
Yeah, some reached lotus feet. These are words that I have heard. I am just saying maybe he did reach lotus feet or maybe he went somewhere. I do not know. But what has actually happened? The actual event is he has died. Your belief of what happened after that person died is your own.
Correct.
Let's call it what it is. And I think it possibly was rooted in the fact that I've been working with children on the spectrum or adults on the spectrum and people on the spectrum for so long that I would like to call it what it is, call a spade a spade.
Having said that, as educators, we both also work very extensively to teach them sarcasm. If you
Yes.
remember, a batch of our students, when they walked in, they absolutely had no idea what sarcasm means.
Right.
And then we both started doing exercises where after a point, they were earning rewards every time
To
they
catch our-
identified
Yeah.
every time they identified whether we were being sarcastic
yeah.
or not. And it was a celebratory moment for both of us.
No, because I would just go, oh, very nice, very good, very good. And then they'll turn around, no, Vahini, not nice.
Because
Not
they-
nice.
they
Because
made a
know what they made a
Yes,
mistake. Oh,
yes.
wow, so nice, amazing. So they know that I had to possibly, exaggerate that level of sarcasm.
That we did have to do.
But the flip of exaggerating regular emotions
Yeah.
is a mistake that we make when they are younger.
Yeah.
Okay. So, for instance, you say, when I started this, I said, hi, how are you? So, if you see how primary school students or Montessori students, like pre-KG, are taught, right? You have emotive actions and say twinkle, twinkle, and you have
The
a
sing song
happy
and everything, yes.
Humpty Dumpty and whatever it is, and ouch and and
Yes,
things,
yes.
The sad thing is, like, unless now for a neurotypical, it kind of wears off.
Correct.
For a child on the spectrum, it possibly doesn't. So we usually tell people to keep their emotions neutral so that, the child makes sense of their own, or the individual makes sense of their own ways to emote rather than copy and imitate and have misplaced things like this whole ouch
Yeah.
thing. I have seen it
So many times. So
yeah.
many times. Even we have seen it. No, but it's also that when you're in an educational environment, then it's about understanding many, many alternatives for one particular concept, isn't it? And when we are working with kids who have words but no meaning to words, I mean, that journey for us was not easy at all. Because we had to, while this child was taught with flashcards and everything, that happens in early intervention, he was able to label only objects to a large extent. I mean, the regular things, the apple, the ball.
Nouns are always easy. I think when you start getting to even action words to a certain extent, because you're jumping and you're feeling that, it's okay. The adjectives has been a nightmare.
Pronouns, adjectives, conjunctions.
I think adjectives was the toughest. I
Yes.
think, forever.
But that is where the work needs to focus. Because that is how cognitive regression is caused. The child keeps moving grade to grade and he has only nouns and verbs. And also that gets limited because you're not going to be doing flashcards with nouns and verbs. You are going to move to sentences. And in that sentences, say for example, there are 10 words in a sentence. And out of that, there are 4 that are nouns and verbs. What is the understanding of that child for that sentence?
It's interesting that you bring this up. I think I've done it. I used to always tell people I've done this only in Hindi as a second language when I was in school. In English, I don't think we did like sentence analysis the way it was done even in Hindi for me. So when you're just given a sentence and you're reading a story, like how we do at SK, right? When we do a story, when you're saying, this is a house in Australia. So what is this? What is? What is a? What is house? What is Australia? It's a country in a article.
Correct.
What are the 5 uses or 10 uses of article? What is 10 uses of the word this? What is the 10 uses of the word house? What are the different kinds of houses you can have? Big house, small house, color house, roof, slanting roof, sloping roof. Is this a house? Is that a house? Bring in generalization. The rigor that is required.
Yes.
If I have to give a neurotypical only 5 examples for a child or a student on the spectrum, I would possibly give 50 or 500.
500 easy.
Yeah.
Easy. Because language is complex, isn't it? And it keeps evolving. And if you want the child to achieve that level of language and articulation, then you have to keep evolving, which is why there are different grades, there are different objectives for language learning as well. Coming back to where we started, language with no meaning, words that mean absolutely nothing, and cognitive regression. And we spoke about various ways to do it. Now let's move to language as a STEM.
As a STEM.
Yes, you gave an example of that as well. When we are working in that space, we also know that we have to crack that. If very interesting thing that I want to bring back is you said, if I use that a particular word or a sentence, let's not limit it, and it's going to be triggering a certain emotion inside me.
Correct.
And then eventually I'm going to go into that space.
Yes. And if I let it be,
Is again, yeah.
then welcome mental illness.
Yes.
I'm not saying immediately,
Yes.
but I'm saying that you have to. I'm not saying you need to stop it. I don't want you to stop feeling. I just want you to articulate better. And I want you to feel that it is okay to feel that emotion and go through it. But after you go through it, it is over.
It's also self-triggering.
Yes.
It is also not affirmative use of language, which is what supports you at that point in time. Of course, all of us experience pain in some way or form, but if we're going to focus on just the subject of pain with our words specifically and keep talking about what went wrong and how that error was made by me and how the consequence of that error was also not something I could cope with, I'm not going to go to a good place. So we see a lot of this as well.
I also think that like over focusing on something is a problem.
But hyper focusing is a part of autism.
Yes, but then the fact is that when you see the child is hyper focusing on something that is next, that is going to take him somewhere else, the first thing that you and I would do is distract the child while we acknowledge what the child is going through, whether it is getting a child to complete his worksheet through his behavior.
Correct.
Right? If that can be true, then this is true too. Right? So I want to get you out of that space and teach you while I'm distracting you, I'm also teaching you to circumnavigate and say when you're feeling so low, you can do something really exciting that makes you happy, get involved in that so that this bit of distress, is not going to be an impairing function.
Yes. But interestingly, meaning making.
Mhm.
When you said, you're stressed, let's do something happy. I am so stressed and I am in that cycle that even if you're giving me options of what can make me happy, I'm not able to access them at the present moment.
Sure.
You facilitate for it, I'm still not able to move towards it in the way that I should be to help myself. That is autism,
Correct.
Vahini.
Correct.
And if we are working with those scenarios, what kind of measures can be taken as preventive measures? Now we are talking about what happens when the bubble is burst. I'm saying,
that's why I said when you start itself, start giving articulation to that. When
from a young age.
Yeah, when you're saying Vahini, oh, it's gonna come. The parent already knows. Forget the teacher, the parent knows. Parent always knows. The parent knows when the child is hungry, when the child is a newborn. Similarly, parent knows when it's coming. When you know it's coming, give meaning to it. Say, oh, you're not feeling okay. What would you like to do? Talk about it. Tell me what's happening.
You say, I am angry.
Prompt gets the person to talk about it. Right? Even after the bubble has burst, there are 100 ways that we have tried and it has worked to a large extent.
Correct.
What I'm trying to say is before that, you can always give meaning to it. I have been saying give meaning, articulate, help that child articulate his emotions better so that it doesn't get into one whole continuous stim mechanism. And it's not just with one unpleasant event. Okay, it can trigger a series of unpleasant events. Okay, this is not making me sad and not getting me into that crazy space. Okay, I'll go to the next event. Then I'll go to the next event. Then I'll go to the next event. It's a chain reaction.
Yes.
And then even after I have solved for all of them and I've helped you through all of them, Now you are upset that you don't have anything to be upset about. I have seen that.
Yes,
Right?
I've seen that.
We have given enough solutions. We have answered every question. With a person with comprehension, I have answered every question. Now finally it has come to, I don't know what I should be upset about, that's why I'm upset.
That is, it's also patterns. Let's
Correct.
understand that when we say autism, they are very, very pattern oriented.
Correct.
And if I'm going to practice something for 5 years of my life, 7 years of my life,
It's very difficult to break that.
yes. So to be sensitive to that aspect and to be very conscious about what kind of a pattern we are inculcating in our children and where it is going to go. Now, if I have been doing that for 7, 8 years and suddenly I'm a teenager and there's changes in my body, there's changes in my mind because of the hormones and stuff like that. And at that time, you want me to change patterns. Vani, I think it's not going to be possible sometimes.
I don't think it's not possible. I mean, it's
It
harder
can
to
be.
break.
There can be, I mean, we have seen situations where there are point of no return. We have seen that. I'm just saying that when we are talking preventive, first identify what does language mean to your child? Is there language? If I'm going to pick up a flashcard and give it to you when you say apple, then that does not mean there is language. That's number one.
Can be just road.
Yeah. And second, if there is language, can you catch the gaps in that language? As an educator, as a parent, as whoever is working with the child, do you have a system in place that can help you effectively capture the gaps? If you are able to do that, then close the gaps and move on with language towards meaning making. If this is not in place, from what I understand, we can't do the second level of work that you're actually asking us to do, where you are saying that building the meaning, then bringing in other counseling options to help the child deflect, distract, or co-regulate, whatever it is that we are trying or escape, whichever way. I don't think we will get to that level. I think I'm going to end with saying that this is a rampant problem and we have seen it very, very regularly. The fact that we meet children between the ages of 8 to 12 with language, but with absolutely no understanding of language. And that is something that we need to work on very aggressively if we have to solve the problem of regression, and also to make sure that we don't associate this with autism and say, oh, because you have autism, you don't have language, which is what is being associated.
I think neurotypicals also are slowly failing in their linguistic abilities. So let's put more meaning to language. And on that note, thank you all for subscribing and see you in our 5th episode.